Just 3 minutes until we begin Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont. 3 minutes, 6 after the hour, we'll be on the air. Welcome to all our network affiliates. This is Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont. Stand by, we're just under 2 minutes till air at 6 minutes after. We're just 1 minute away now from Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont. Stand by. When you hear the music end, you'll have just under 30 seconds to air. Stand by for Beyond the Beltway.
Live from Chicago, this is Bruce DuMont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight, featuring commentary by Azam Akram, Michael Bauer, Amara Anya, and Doug Ibenthal. Our program tonight coming to our home base at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago, where our phone lines are open at 1-800-723-8289. That's 1-800-723-8289. If you'd like to email me a comment, my email address is brucedumont@museum.tv. If you would like to tweet me a comment, it's @Dumo, @DUMO. And of course, you can join us on the World Wide Web, audio and video at our website, beyondthebeltway.com. Well, there are 330 days to go before Election Day. Everyone knows by now that Hillary Clinton pretty much has the Democratic nomination wrapped up. That may be offensive to some Democrats, but we'll at least let one Democrat respond to that assessment tonight. But again, the big news, of course, is what's happening in the Republican primary. New polls came out today from NBC and Wall Street Journal. These are national Republican polls. It has Donald Trump in first place at 27%. This is the national tallying for Donald Trump. That's up 4%. Ted Cruz has moved into second place with 22%. That's up 12 points from the last time the survey was taken. Marco Rubio is at 15%. That's up 4. And Ben Carson is now at 11%. That is a drop of 18 points since the polls were last taken. There are also 50 days to go before the important Iowa caucuses on February 1st. And last evening, the Des Moines Register, Bloomberg, came out with new polls in the Hawkeye State, and they were dramatic. And here they are. Ted Cruz has moved into first place now with 31%. That is an increase of 21 points since the poll was last taken. Donald Trump has fallen into second place at 21%, but that's still an increase over what he did have. Ben Carson is at 13%, and this is where he is the big loser. He has lost 15 points of support from Iowa, likely Iowa caucus goers. Marco Rubio is at 10%. That's an increase of just 1%. And Jeb Bush is at 6%. That is also a minor increase of just 1%. But that is what is happening in Iowa. And of course, in the last week, we should mention that these polls were taken after the controversial comments made earlier this week by Donald Trump, in which he suggested that if he was president, he would like to ban all Muslims coming to the country. And again, he's doubled down on that in virtually every interview. The leadership of the Republican Party and all of the other Republicans have come out against him. Basically, every editorial board that has a printing press has come out against him. And today he was on Fox News with Chris Wallace, and he was asked again about his comments, and this is what he had to say today.
Sickness. They're sick people. There's a sickness going on. There is a group of people that is very sick, and we have to figure out the answer. And the Muslims can help us figure out the answer.
Now, joining us now is Azam Akram. Azam, thank you very much for being with us. You are an imam. You're a Muslim. You were on this program a couple of weeks ago, and you were here because of a story in the Chicago Tribune which identified you as a Muslim who was trying to present a more moderate view of Islam to the United States and to your followers in your area. Obviously, a lot has happened since that has happened, but follow up, if you will, just on what Donald Trump said just in the interview today. Sick people, a lot of sick people. Your response?
My response is that it's pretty hard to classify over 1.6, 1.7 billion people all over the world as being sick. My response as an imam is what my faith teaches me. And my faith teaches me when you hear comments of nonsense or that don't have that light behind them, you reply with the statement of peace. I honestly feel that statement that was made today, that these are a bunch of sick people, is a sick statement in itself. So we, as Muslims, and one of the oldest Muslim organization here in America, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we rally together. The second part I agree with is that we need the Muslims to help us. And we, as the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, are out there trying to educate the people.
And that was the basis of this Tribune story that got us together.
Absolutely. And we have to recognize and identify the fact that in every class of society, there are those people who are on the fringes, who are extremists, who behave deviantly, and who don't follow the simple morals of or laws of the land. And that's in every society.
Doug Ibenthal also joins us. Doug, you were a supporter of Donald Trump. What is your response to the interview today in which Donald Trump basically threw all Muslims into the same pool? Your response?
Well, first of all, I want to say that what your other guest just said, I thought it was very, very reasonable. I mean, there's really nothing there that I really take issue with. But I do take issue with this idea lumping in any misrepresentation of what Trump said and what he has said in the past. The same thing came when he first originally announced his campaign with respect to Mexican immigrants, where he's saying this about all people. That's not fair. No one.
When he says they are sick people,
well,
what is he talking about?
Well, the two who shot up the place and killed a lot of people in San Bernardino certainly were.
No, but he was talking about Muslims in general. That was the question today. And he said, you know,
I don't get
they're
that.
Sick. They are sick people. And then he came back and said, obviously, you know, some of these people are really sick.
The vast majority of Muslim folks are good, decent people, peace-loving people. No one disputes that. No one disputes that. Donald Trump certainly disputes that. But we also cannot dispute that there is a I have no idea what the percentage is, but there is a radical, violent faction that, and when Donald Trump talks about this, it's about immigration. It's about safety.
I want to come back, but I do want to get our other guests. Amara, Enya, you were here. You're a Democrat. What does it say about what's happening in the country that in the wake of these comments about banning Muslims to the United States, his poll numbers went up? What does that say?
Well, I think it's consistent with the reactions to Donald Trump's comments throughout his campaign. I mean, he said very radical things, and after each time, many of us, myself included, would think, oh, well, maybe this is what will wake people up and his poll numbers will drop, and actually the opposite has happened. So it's been consistent with the messages that he's put out across the campaign, but I think ultimately he's speaking to a contingent, and it might not be necessarily what he says, but perhaps it's how he says it and how he expresses himself, which is not typical political speak that we're used to.
Michael Bauer joins us. You're the closest thing to a card-carrying Democrat at the table. So my question to you is, when he says these things and the polls go up, does it make some Democrats shudder, or are you just chomping at the bit because you think you'll be easy pickings in a general election? Or are you worried?
Well, I think anyone who thinks he's necessarily going to be easy pickings is fooling themselves. He is clearly resonating with a wide segment of the American population. Bill Clinton used to have a great saying. At times of fear, the American public would rather go with someone strong and wrong rather than someone weak and right. And we once went through a national security election in 2004 when George W. Bush was running for re-election against John Kerry. And George Bush was perceived as strong, and John Kerry was perceived as weak. George Bush won his re-election.
We got to pause. Back shortly.
Excuse me, Chad. Here is a flash from the Associated Press, Dateline Dallas. 2 priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead of bullet wounds.
It was a moment that defined American history. But what really happened in Dallas that day? And does that tragedy lead back to Chicago? A new play, Assassination Theater, answers that question. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. For tickets, go to assassinationtheater.com.
The beauty of Amling's interior landscape is that we can come in, work with your budget, and create a fit that makes sense for your facility at that time. Our goal is to create foliage designs that not only look incredible the day we put them in, but you can go back 2 years later and it is still maintained and has grown as a perfect fit for that customer's environment.
Call Amlings now at 888-880-TREE. Bruce DuMont, thanks very much for joining us. We're back on the air. Azam Akram, I want to get your reaction. You've heard everyone talk, and we're going to talk more about what Muslim Americans can do to assist in changing the image of Islam, and also in your battle of trying to help root out those within your midst who want to do damage not only to those living in the United States, but obviously ISIS has killed a lot of Muslims as well. But I want to get your reaction to sort of the political. This is a political program. Right. And I want to ask you the question. What does it say to you when someone says what Donald Trump says and you see his poll numbers go up? How do you feel?
You know, you feel disheartened, you feel discouraged, because one thing we recognize as Americans is that America is a nation built on immigrants. Muslim immigrants have contributed a lot to this country and are still contributing a lot. Right now with me, I brought my friend who is a head surgeon here in the Chicago hospitals, and he's a Muslim. He's helping treat people and alleviate suffering and a lot of the problems.
But you know, I don't think there's a lot of people at this table, and I don't think there's a lot of people watching or listening to this show this evening would disagree with what you've just said.
Right.
There are a lot of, the vast majority in the whole world, the vast majority of Muslims may be good people and may be peace-loving people. Right. But how do you go about stopping the recruitment of some within your religion who are going to do things like the folks, the couple in San Bernardino, California? And do you understand why Americans are very fearful of people who might look like you or go to a mosque as opposed to the local Bible church?
Absolutely. I totally get where they're coming from. We in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we want people to come. We open up our mosques, over 76 mosques all across the U.S. I'll give you a personal example. 3 days ago, I got a call. We have a 1-800-Y-ISLAM number that we promote. If you want to learn more about Islam, you call that number and we'll try to help you out, educate people. I got a call from a gentleman named John. I'm not going to disclose the location. A Caucasian male calls me up and asks me, you know, what do I have to do to join ISIS? Or how can I join ISIS? I said, what are you talking about? I said, we can talk to you about Islam, we can talk to you about the Quran, we can talk to you, no, I don't want to learn about the Quran, I don't want to learn about Islam, I just want to join ISIS. We get many calls sometimes like that, and we work very closely with the FBI and authorities to seek and root out these type of individuals, not only within our community, but communities all across the U.S. So when we say it's an Islamic problem or it's a Muslim problem, it's not. There are many other individuals out there that sometimes we get phone calls from who want to be part of this.
Doug, Doug, I want to get your reaction to, again, what he just said, because it sort of suggests what I have suggested over the last several years on this program, is that there are many cells, sleeper cells in the United States that have been discovered and rooted out. And I have said, even though the FBI may never admit to this publicly, there are many plots against the people of the United States that were stopped because of some tip that came from within the American Muslim community that doesn't want their local theater shot up any more than the people in Park Ridge, Illinois. So, again, put that in context to what, I mean, Donald Trump could say exactly what I just said, but he doesn't. Why not?
Well, look, first of all...
And do you agree with what I just said?
I do agree with it. And first of all, and I might articulate this issue a little differently than Donald Trump does, but he's the one who's made billions of dollars and is, you know, leading the polls. He's a smart guy. He has raised this issue. We wouldn't even be talking about immigration. We wouldn't be talking about these issues and having this conversation if it weren't for him. And the simple fact is, people are recognizing these polls. It's not about racism. It's not about discrimination. He is saying a fact that everyone can recognize. We have a problem with our immigration system. The woman that was involved with that, you know, shooting up the place in San Bernardino, and her husband, the woman came here on a fiancé visa, obviously slipped through the cracks. That is a huge problem. Now we find out that she has some things on Facebook, prior to the attack where she was pledging allegiance to ISIS, and the government says, oh, well, we don't really look at social media. That is a problem. Everyone can recognize that's a problem.
Amara, do you agree with that?
To look into social media?
Secretary of State Kerry said, he said, well, that's something we have to look into. I think the American people are tired of our elected officials saying, we're going to look into something when some of these things are pretty much common sense.
Well, I would have imagined that social media is part of the suite of things that they look into when there are people that are indicated to be either on a terrorist watch list or of some sort. I know with the Boston bombing situation, they had looked at the social media accounts of 2 of the suspects, I believe. So I think that's just part of the suite of things that they look into when they're trying to track and stop terrorists before any acts occur.
But do you believe there's a policy, if not a written policy, a perceived policy amongst those that are checking things out, that maybe they will not be aggressive in looking after Muslims because they may fear that they are profiling Muslims when maybe in some cases they should be?
Well, they were purported to have 3 background checks on this woman done. 3 background checks. And 3 background checks failed to figure this out. The problem...
So we're supposed to trust in a government
where
you've just admitted there were 3 problems?
No, that's what's in the news right now.
That's right, it is.
Right? So it's...
But the difficulty here is our immigration system, even for people who are coming in on a fiancé visa, a student visa, a travel visa, is really messed up. Our security system is a highly reactionary system. When something happens, when someone tries using some liquids to blow up an airplane, suddenly the government says, we're now going to limit people to 3 ounces or 3.5 ounces of liquid. When the shoe bomber tries to blow up a plane, all of a sudden people have to take off their shoes now for security. It's all very reactive. We don't really spend time thinking in advance of what ways could people use to undermine security in this country and how to be proactive rather than constantly being reactive.
Doug.
In 2011, Barack Obama suspended immigration he suspended the refugee program for Iraqi refugees after 2 people with al-Qaeda ties had been arrested conspiring in Kentucky. He suspended immigration from Iraq and the refugee program for 6 months. Now, we didn't find out, he didn't tell Congress, the administration didn't tell Congress for another couple years. But no one, I don't recall anyone saying that Barack Obama was, saying he was a fascist or comparing him to or racist at that time. That was considered, and I think still considered, a reasonable move. I
think where Donald Trump gets into trouble is when he says something like, they're all sick, or his comments about Mexicans, even though he did come back and say rapists and murderers. The implication is that they're all bad people. And if he would, again, maybe that's why he's so popular, because he lumps everybody together without zeroing in on where the real problem.
Well, he's also made it very clear he has investments in the Middle East. I mean, and he is talking about the small.
They took him off the billboard.
He's talking about the outliers. He's talking about a small group of people.
Okay.
As a Muslim, I feel a certain sense of offense when we say that Muslims are from the Middle East. It's only 20% or even less are from the Middle East.
And you're from Canada.
And I'm from Canada. The largest Muslim population in the world is in Indonesia. Yeah. Right. So they have different complexions, they have different faces. How do you identify a Muslim? I can understand it, Iraq, because there was a war going on with that country. It's not a religion, it's not a ideology. It's not a people that you're bunching together in one class.
Trump put out a simple proposal to get people talking. Put out a simple proposal. Read Art of the Deal. This is what he does. This is why he's so successful. It's called negotiation. He starts with one point and then you discuss from there. But compared to what his proposal to what, for example, Israel is already doing, and look at the restrictions they have and what they require and how they prevent immigration from certain countries and certain people. Japan, one of our strongest NATO, most loyal NATO allies, it is almost impossible for a person of Muslim descent to become a citizen of Japan. And I don't hear the same sort of hysteria against our Japanese allies and against Israel and Mr. Netanyahu about what they're doing.
But those weren't the principles on which America was based off of. America embraces all. Let me just read to you the inscription on the Statue of Liberty. It says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." I mean, America has been based on embracing
But
all.
you said something very important.
Right.
The yearning to be free. The perception of many Americans is that the radical Muslims,
Right.
who we're focusing on here, the radical Muslims, they're not interested in freedom. They're interested in Sharia law. They're interested in keeping women back into the 1800s. They don't want gays and lesbians to marry. They don't want all the things that being an American is all about. That's freedom. They don't want that type of freedom. They want a freedom that says everyone has the perception. Everyone has to be a Muslim. And if you're not a Muslim, we're going to cut your head off, or we don't want you. I mean, that's the word freedom is the key point. I'm glad you brought it up, because that does separate, what's inscribed on the Statue of Liberty from what is in the minds of some Muslims who, if not sick, they are twisted in their interpretation of the religion. I do have to pause. I want to get everybody's reaction. We have some callers on the line. 1-800-723-8289 from coast to coast and border to border. I'm Bruce DuMont. Hop on the line. We've got a great conversation going this evening. We'd like you to join in. Thanks very much. Don't go away. Right back.
This is Larry King at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. Tonight we've got a special guest for you to meet. What do you like to do as a kid?
I like to play baseball. I like to watch television.
What was your favorite sports team?
Sports team growing up was the St. Louis Cardinals.
What was your favorite vacation?
I think the vacation we went to New York City to the World's Fair. It was to see Yankee Stadium.
Who was your childhood hero?
Childhood hero, probably Hopalong Cassidy.
What was your biggest fear growing up?
The biggest fear probably was that I would irritate my father.
What's the silliest thing you've ever done?
Irritated my father.
Give the gift of Larry King. Order your gift certificate now at museum.tv. That's museum.tv. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thanks very much for joining us. Michael Bauer, you wanted to make a point before the break?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to remember when we talk about radical Islam fundamentalism that the number one victim of these folks are Muslims. Muslims were the number one victim of terrorism in 2014. Whether it's Al Qaeda or it's
ISIS.
or ISIS or Al Shabaab or Boko Haram, a lot of them they're killing Muslims. So I think painting all Muslims as saying that they're supportive of this, we're not recognizing they're actually the victims more than any other group.
Okay, let's go to calls. We have people waiting on the line. Let's go to Jorge or George listening to us on KTSM in El Paso. Are you George or Jorge?
No, it's Jorge.
Okay,
And the reason
good.
I'm Jorge is because I'm American Hispanic.
Okay.
And I want to comment on the whole idea that the Muslims in the United States, they can't speak broadly to the issue and say, no, what you did was wrong. It may have been at one time that we were asked to do what we were doing with respect to the violence that we incurred in the world, but that no longer is the case, and not with America. And it's wrong to point to the Statue of Liberty and say that those are our principles. Our principles are contained in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. That Statue of Liberty is just a symbol of those principles and not the principles themselves. Thank you.
Okay, Akram, you wanted to comment on that.
Well, that's the whole point. It's that our founding fathers, when they came together and they talked about freedom and civil liberties and all these other things, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, they weren't expecting the elite to come to America and build it up. They were, and this is why I quoted the inscription on the Statue of Liberty. It says, "Send me your huddled, homeless, the downtrodden people," because you can see that they have the fire within to improve themselves. This is what's going on in the Muslim world. A lot of Muslims are want to run out of their so-called Muslim countries. Give me one Muslim country in this world today that is abiding by the true principles of Islam. You talk about Sharia. Which Sharia would you like to choose? It's like the flavor of the month. Would you like the Saudi Sharia? Would you like the Indonesian Sharia? Would you like the Turkish Sharia? If it was Sharia, if it was law, in Islam, it should have been a all-embracing, all-equal law. So I say this to my Muslim brothers and sisters out there. America embraced us. We came here, just like everybody else. America embraced everyone to come and further progress themselves. And that's what Muslims are trying to do, are coming over. And the good ones, yes, you'll get a few bad here and there, but that's, like I said, in every community, in every...
Doug.
Of course, America has been built by immigrants, but we're also about security, and we're also about protecting ourselves and our way of life. Look, Christianity has had big problems in the past. Certainly, if you go way back in ancient history, more recently, maybe we could point to the problem with the pedophile priest. And people had no problem saying, "Look, the Catholic Church needs to do more." It's not, no one said, "Oh, it's a terrible thing. You can't condemn all, the entire Catholic Church." But people, it was very reasonable for people to say, "Look, Catholic Church, you need to step up and do more. You've got a problem within your church right now." Probably even as we speak here tonight, there are people, protesting the shooting of the young the police shooting of the young black kid in Chicago. Very appropriate. Even though that's a tiny, tiny, tiny handful of Chicago cops who are responsible for that and that behavior, is perfectly appropriate. I agree with the people who say, look, the Chicago cops, the police force, should step up and do more. Similarly, there is absolutely nothing wrong with regular folks. We're not all racist. We're not bad people. Donald Trump's not a bad person when he says, look, Muslim folks, we know the vast majority of you are good people, but here's a place where you can do more.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
But
then to perpetuate that statement by saying that you saw footage or film after 9/11 of thousands of people in New Jersey cheering and praising and couldn't, come on, that is...
No, actually, forget about the numbers, the exact numbers, but it is undisputable. There is undisputable empirical evidence that people celebrated
But you
9/11
can't.
attacks.
But here's the point: you can't say thousands and thousands if it was hundreds and hundreds or scores and scores. Amira, to you.
I think the thing that I struggle with, and probably a nuance that Donald Trump doesn't care to address, is how we're characterizing the population. The fact that we are saying Muslim. So, for example, in Nigeria, we have Boko Haram. who has been terrorizing the country in the northern, which is Muslim, as well as in southern and in the capital and other places. And so how do you distinguish? I mean, we're not looking at the root cause of what causes someone to be radicalized. And to me, that's the issue. I recall during right after the Boston bombing, where people struggled, journalists struggled to identify Dzhokhar Tsarnaev because he was from the Caucasus region. He was from Central Asia, which is heavily Muslim. But there was confusion about how to characterize him because he didn't look like what has been popularly portrayed as Muslim in America. And I think that difficulty in the blanket statement of saying it's Muslim and even the conception this is religious, from my standpoint, at least from what I've experienced, is that whenever you have a situation where there are resource emergencies, where a state is not legitimate, where people don't have access to work, to education, where they're struggling, that is what allows for radicalism to take place, but it's done so under the guise of religion. But if you look deeper, it's actually not necessarily the religion that's causing radicalization and the terrorist acts.
Michael Bauer.
You know, one thing that no one talks about is if we're going to actually ban Muslims for a period of time from coming to this country on any sort of visa, how exactly do we do that? At one point, Jeb Bush, in this fit of insanity, said, well, we should let Syrian Christians come in. We should just not let Syrian Muslims come in.
Right.
And he was asked, well, how will we know the difference? And he said, well, we'll know. So, and that got dropped.
To me, is just as stupid an idea.
Of course.
As some
So
of
the
things
question
that
is,
Trump has said.
if someone's coming from China, China has a significant Muslim population. How will we know that person's Muslim unless they self-identify at customs?
And that's what I struggle with, and I have to make this point because right after the bomber, the underwear bomber, right after that incident occurred, and I was traveling internationally. I have a Nigerian passport in addition to my American passport, and at that time they had created a list of, I guess, Nigerian names. But from some of our names, we don't have. You might still have a Nigerian or an ethnic, an Igbo, a Yoruba, a Hausa name, but it might not necessarily be a Muslim name. But they had still constructed a list, and so as we were traveling, they were looking at our passports. I got pulled out to have because my name is clearly a Nigerian name. So again, the question is, how do you identify who's Muslim?
Your points are good ones. I mean, I'll tell you what, it's not a simple problem to solve, but I'll tell you what Israel does. They ask people at the airport. They actually ask people at the airport. That's where they start. They have a.
What do they ask them?
They ask them where they came from.
Well, they're going to lie about that.
They ask what their religion is. That look it up. Look at what our State Department says. John Kerry has actually been critical of Israel about how restrictive they are.
Let's go to Kathy, listening to us in Chicago on the internet. Go ahead, you're on the air, Kathy.
Thanks, Bruce. I just wanted to make the point that when we're quoting Donald Trump on Fox News, what he said to Chris Wallace today, he actually said that when he described the sick people, he actually argued that the extreme members of the Muslim religion who support terrorism are sick people.
That's not what he said, Kathy.
Yes, it's exactly what he said.
No, it's not. We played the tape exactly as it is.
The tape. And he also said that it's actually the Muslims that can help figure out
that he
who
did
those
say.
sick people
That
are.
he did say. That he did say.
And that's exactly what he was talking about. He was
Okay.
talking about in response to the two people from California who were shooting him up, and he was referencing them as the sick people. And I think we can all agree upon that.
Well,
that
number
we can
one,
say that there was a
I would
certain
agree with that.
element.
The latter part of what you said was true. In fact, Fritz, tell me whether or not we can play that tape again. The Muslim tape. All right, listen, Kathy, we're going to play it again. Here it goes. Roll it. Hang on, I'm told.
There's a sickness. They're sick people. There's a sickness going on. There is a group of people that is very sick, and we have to figure out the answer. And the Muslims can help us figure out the answer.
There was no caveat that preceded that talked about the people.
The caveat was a question by Chris Wallace, which was talking about the two San Bernardino shooters.
It was not.
And
But Kathy,
it absolutely was.
Really, Kathy, that's not what happened on the air today. There was a mistake. We're going to move on. You and I disagree, but I want to get to the bigger, broader issue here is, and it gets back to my second question tonight. Donald Trump is saying these things, and he's saying some other things that the establishment and editorial writers and the elites of the world are going crazy about. And he continues to move forward in the polls. So my question is, with the belief now that the Republican establishment wants to gang up on him and find some way in which they can have a brokered convention. I mean, it seems to me if you're talking, if those establishment people think that Donald Trump is going to ruin the Republican Party, I got to tell you, the establishment that moves forward to try to stop Donald Trump, they're the ones that are ruining the party. And they will be ruining the party because they will be ganging up on someone who at the moment is representing a large percentage of those that are going to run in the Republican primary. And when you add what he said with what Ted Cruz has said and what Ben Carson has said, right. I mean, that's 60% of the people don't like establishment Republicans. They don't like Jeb Bush. They don't like the millions and millions that have been poured in to prop up a dead fish. He's going nowhere.
I couldn't agree with you more, Bruce. In fact, I should say for the record, I was a mocker of Donald Trump just 6 months ago. I really was. I mocked Donald Trump. You can look at my old my tweet and
you went
Facebook
from a mocker
archives.
to a mocker.
But I was, I mocked his big sign just around the corner of on his building, right a corner from where we're sitting tonight. But I came to his defense and I came to his camp because I saw exactly what was going on. It's not just the people that are afraid that, that Republicans are finally going to nominate someone who can beat Hillary, who are afraid that we're not going to nominate another milquetoast again. But like you said, it's the establishment people, and the attacks have just been over the top. They've been hysterical. And I've come to Donald Trump's defense because I can see exactly what's going on.
When we come back, those people that want a Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump campaign for president, if you get your way, we're going to give you a sample of what that first debate might sound like. Back shortly.
The beauty of Amling's interior landscape is that we can come in, work with your budget, and create a fit that makes sense for your facility at that time. Our goal is to create foliage designs that not only look incredible the day we put them in, but you can go back 2 years later and it is still maintained and has grown as a perfect fit for that customer's environment.
Call Amlings now at 888-880-TREE.
Excuse me, Chet. Here is a flash from the Associated Press, Dateline Dallas. 2 priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead of bullet wounds.
It was a moment that defined American history. But what really happened in Dallas that day? And does that tragedy lead back to Chicago? A new play, Assassination Theater, answers that question. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. For tickets, go to assassinationtheater.com. Chicago. Again, if you did not see Fox Sunday News today with Chris Wallace today, you saw a sample of maybe some rhetoric that will come up Tuesday night in the Republican debate in Nevada. It's the last one of this cycle. The Democrats will have theirs in New Hampshire next Saturday night on ABC. But during the interview today, Donald Trump was asked that recent polls suggest that women and Hispanics and Muslims overwhelmingly are not supportive of his candidacy, and he specifically zeroed in on women, saying that he would do very well with women. And then he continued his assessment of whether or not he would be popular with women, and then he launched into perhaps the most well-known woman in America.
I'm a leader. I'm not like Hillary Clinton. She's got no strength. She's got no stamina. Everything she does is like theatrical. Oh, Donald Trump said this. He actually, it's sort of interesting. She said, I watched her last night, Donald Trump, looks like she practices in front of a mirror for 2 hours. Donald Trump said, I think he's dangerous. I'm dangerous. She's the one that caused all this problem. With her stupid policies, you look at what she did with Libya, what she did with Syria. Look at Egypt, what happened with Egypt. A total mess. We don't back any of our allies. You look, she was truly, if not one of the worst Secretary of States in the history of the country. She talks about me being dangerous. She's killed hundreds of thousands of people with her stupidity.
Wow. Do you agree with that, Doug? Hundreds of thousands of people?
It's fine. I think you can make that argument. Look, Donald Trump says some things that maybe I wouldn't necessarily articulate in the way he does. But look, the reason he's doing so well is because it's so refreshing to have especially a Republican politician who actually says what he really thinks to your face. I would much rather have that. Very quickly, I remember 4 years ago when the primary came to Illinois, it was down to Mitt Romney. Santorum then was the last great white hope of Republican conservatives. And I was getting, Mr. Polite, Mr. Professional, Mitt Romney, I was literally getting, in the week before that primary, was getting 6 nasty robocalls from the Mitt Romney campaign and his super PACs bashing and smearing Santorum. I would much rather have Donald Trump, who's out there and maybe stabs you in your face, but at least he doesn't stab you in your back.
Rhetoric like that.
Wow.
Hundreds of thousands may have been an over-exaggeration, but probably people could argue that maybe tens of thousands of people were killed because of those policies.
Well, here's the difficulty in the clip you just played from Donald Trump. And if this becomes a general election between Trump and Clinton, Clinton's 4 years as Secretary of State, it's hard to look back on and figure out any accomplishments she had where she was successful. Everything she touched turned to crap. All right, and it doesn't matter.
That was his point.
And that was his point.
But then he put body bags associated with it.
But that's typical Donald Trump about taking a point that actually has some basis and then broadening it.
Amara, I want to get your reaction.
Figure out what he's saying.
As a Democrat, I want to get your reaction to that.
Well, I mean, I think it's easier from his perspective. I mean, she has the track record, whereas he does not. I would be more interested in hearing what he would have done differently than just blanket basically trashing her entire tenure as Secretary of State. Now, I will say that there were many missteps in retrospect, but at the same time, it's easy to, when you're not in that position, you haven't had to make those decisions, to be critical.
During the same program today, he was asked about Justice Anton Scalia's comments that were recorded, in which he basically said that African Americans going to high-end schools maybe should go to low-end schools where it's less competitive and they would be more successful. Donald Trump was asked about that, and he said he was shocked that Scalia said it, and he disagreed with what Scalia said. So my question to you is, in the climate that we have in Chicago and in America with Black Lives Matter, and in the city of Chicago where many African Americans want the mayor of Chicago to resign because of the police scandals and the murder of Laquan McDonald and other questionable activities by the police department, does Donald Trump, in your opinion, have the ability to make a case that he's a better bet for African Americans and will do more for their aspirations than Hillary Clinton?
Well, I will say that just in regards to what Justice Scalia said that it has nothing to do with the achievement level or the achievement ability of African Americans, and more so to do with structural systemic racism that kept African Americans out of institutions where they otherwise would rightfully have been. So that
But
point
no other Republican that I'm aware of was challenging what Scalia said. Donald Trump challenged, he said he disagreed with Scalia. Does he get any points within the black community for saying that?
I certainly think he will get some points. If nothing else, he will get their ear. The other thing that I think we have to look at is how Hillary Clinton responded to what's been happening in Chicago. She put out a tepid statement initially and then called for an investigation, but also reiterated her support for the mayor, which I think actually rubbed a lot of people the wrong way and sent a message to the African American community that put them on guard.
And the president has said.
And the president, he has put out fairly tepid responses as well. If at all, they've called for a DOJ investigation, but cynically, with the closeness of the mayor's relationship to the administration, what really would come out of that investigation?
Doug.
Just one quick thing, Bruce. How about this? I'll take some disagreement with Trump over the comment about blaming Hillary for 100,000 dead or whatever. I would certainly say that is an accurate statement, but I would not limit it to responsibility to Hillary Clinton. We're talking about the Middle East, right? We're talking about the destabilization of Middle East, ISIS, and innocent people getting killed there. But it's not just the Obama administration. The responsibilities also has to rest in conjunction with Jeb Bush's brother, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Let's face it. What has happened over there and the way we left it has been a disaster.
But what we have is, as a result of an overreaction by George W. Bush and his administration in Iraq, we have an underreaction by Barack Obama and his administration in Syria. And what Iraq was to George W. Bush, Syria will end up being to Barack Obama. I guarantee you historians will judge.
Okay.
Totally
You're
agree.
listening to Beyond the Beltway. 1-800-723-8289 is the phone number. 1-800-723-8289. I'm Bruce DuMont, back shortly from Chicago.
Looking for the ideal place for you and your family to relax and enjoy yourselves? A place that combines a 4-diamond hotel experience with... and other breathtaking views and a world-class Las Vegas-style seafood and prime rib buffet every weekend and holidays. Share family fun and enjoy the oasis of the palm tree-lined pool and whirlpool. Relax in your own private poolside cabana with a cocktail or snack at your fingertips. Book your reservation today at HiltonUniversal.com or call 1-800-774-1500. The Hilton Los Angeles Universal City. At HiltonUniversal.com, they let you be the star in Hollywood.
The beauty of Amling's interior landscape is that we can come in, work with your budget, and create a fit that makes sense for your facility at that time. Our goal is to create foliage designs that not only look incredible the day we put them in, but you can go back 2 years later and it is still maintained and has grown as a perfect fit for that customer's environment.
Call Amlings now at 888-880-TREE.
Everyone loves vacationing in Florida. So why not experience it as it was meant to be? Where turquoise Gulf waters meet tranquil island beaches. Feel the powder-soft sand between your toes. Revel in a glorious island sunset. Shop the boutiques of a seaside village. Ride horseback along tranquil waters. This is Bradenton Anna Maria Island, Longboat Key. Real, authentic Florida, where you can discover an intimate downtown and sip cappuccino at a sidewalk cafe. Catch fresh fish for dinner. Even tour a working winery. Just minutes from all the rest Florida has to offer. Bradenton, Anna Maria Island, Longboat Key. Plan your visit online at BradentonGulfIslands.com. That's BradentonGulfIslands.com.
Excuse me, Chet. Here is a flash from the Associated Press, Dateline Dallas. Two priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead of bullet wounds.
It was a moment that defined American history. But what really happened in Dallas that day? And does that tragedy lead back to Chicago? A new play, Assassination Theater, answers that question. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. For tickets, go to assassinationtheater.com. Bruce DuMont back live in Chicago. Thanks for being with us tonight on Beyond the Beltway on America's great radio stations from coast to coast and border to border, and now around the world on BeyondTheBeltway.com. Michael Bauer is one of our Democrats this evening. And, Michael, you're sort of a unique Democrat in that you're not overly enthusiastic about some of the Democrats that are running. Have I summarized that?
I think that's correct. I'm not enthusiastic about any of the Democrats who are running, and I don't think I'm necessarily unique about that. I think I know a great many other Democrats who share my lack of enthusiasm.
Why?
Well, first you have Secretary Clinton, and I think, I'll speak for myself. I look at her record as after 8 years in the Senate and 4 years as Secretary of State, and I ask her fervent supporters, please tell me one thing she accomplished that was successful. I mean, she never passed any legislation in the Senate. Everything I can think of that she touched as Secretary of State turned to mud. So I'm not sure what qualifies her to be President or Commander-in-Chief, although I know she traveled a great deal as Secretary of State.
Amara, let me ask you the same question. You're also a Democrat, but you have said off the air, you're a little lukewarm to this field. In fact, we met when you were here, part of a draft Joe Biden movement. So you're less than enthusiastic about this. So tell us where you come down, especially as it relates, we should mention for people around the country, you're African American. You're very concerned about what's happening in the city of Chicago with the police shootings and with the current political leadership.
Well, I mean, I am definitely underwhelmed with the field of Democratic candidates. I actually like O'Malley, as you know, rightly or wrongly, however he does in the polls. But I'm very underwhelmed. I think that for a presidential election, for this to be the best that the Democratic Party has to offer, it's very disappointing on a number of fronts. When you look at just who is representing us, you have Clinton, who is sort of the presumed nominee, and I don't like that notion of her being the presumed nominee as though it's somehow owed to her because she didn't get it back in 2008. And then you have Sanders, who I think has been refreshing. I think he brings a perspective, a progressive perspective that speaks to a lot of those who are fighting, especially on the economic inequality in this country, which I think is one of the biggest challenges that we face. And he's energized something across the country. He also is sort of more plain spoken. And I think he's energized people. But as a whole, I think the Democratic Party really needs to do some self-reflecting about what kinds of individuals they can pull up from the ranks that represent this country and that can speak to what the people are feeling.
Do you believe that what's happening in Chicago with the police shootings in Chicago, the way in which the mayor of the city of Chicago has reacted to it, that he kept the lid on the release of these horrible tapes involving Officer Van Dyke until just a couple of weeks ago, the protests that are happening virtually every single day in the city of Chicago, the demands for him to step down. In fact, the Rahm Emanuel and his future and what's happening in Chicago, it was referenced on virtually all of the Sunday morning shows today. So this is now a national story. Do you think there's a possibility that Rahm would actually step down because he may be viewed by some national Democratic leaders as an albatross around their political neck when it comes to electing a Democratic president in 2016?
The mayor would not step down on his own. The only thing that would pressure him to step down is the National Democratic Party saying that he is tainting Hillary Clinton's chances for becoming the nominee. I think there's a great opportunity for Senator Sanders to peel away black voters who are quite frankly disillusioned with Hillary Clinton because she expressed support for the mayor in light of everything that's happening on the ground. I think that is a very real thing that they need to be concerned about. And so pressure from the Democratic Party, I think, is the only thing that would get the mayor to step aside. Also, as many are calling for him to resign, I think also that what we need to be talking about is changing the power dynamic in City Hall. It's supposed to be a strong council, weak mayor dynamic, and he might stay there. And if he stays there, this is the chance to change that power dynamic to what it's supposed to be.
Doug Ebenthal, I mean, you are a Republican, but you've been very critical of the establishment Republican for a long, long time. Does the concept of protests in the street against an elected official, the mayor of Chicago, is that something you cheer? Or no matter how bad you may think Rahm Emanuel is, damn it, he was elected by the people and he should fulfill a 4-year term?
Well, like I said, I am a Republican. I don't love being in the uncomfortable position of defending Rahm Emanuel, but And first, let me say that what my fellow panelists here have articulated, I thought was very, very good. I really don't agree with that. And yes, absolutely, there is a intellectually honest case for why Rahm Emanuel should have to step down. Distinguished members here have articulated those very well. But where I do disagree a bit, when I see, and why I do not think that Rahm Emanuel is ever going to step down, is because he can see, just as I do, that some, not all, but some of the people calling for his resignation, it is not about corruption, and it's certainly not about young black kids getting shot in the street by a few rogue, bad, murdery cops. It's about money, and it's about the fact that Rahm Emanuel is not enough of a pushover for them and is not giving away the store fast enough. But yes, that said, as Bruce, as I think you well know, I've called for a number of people over the years. I've called for a number of people to step down from office over the years.
Michael Bauer, I want to get, when you were here a couple of weeks ago, this story was brewing and breaking at that particular time. You're very active in the gay and lesbian community, have been for many years, one of the major fundraisers in that community. The question at that time was, there didn't seem to be a lot of concern within the gay and lesbian community about Rahm's problems with the police. Has that changed in the last 3 weeks?
I think it is changing. The primary gay and lesbian newspaper, Windy City Times, the publisher, has an open op-ed this week calling on the mayor to have an open election for, in essence, for city mayor. I think this is growing. I think what we're seeing in Chicago right now is what I think is our version of the so-called Arab Spring, where people are just marching in the streets. They're upset about what has gone on in the city for a long time. This is not just aimed at the mayor or the state's attorney. I think much of the anger is going to be aimed at members of the city council as well, who have voted time and time again for all these settlements for police abuse and police brutality cases, and never ever occurred to them that perhaps we had a problem with the police department and rogue members of it. I think this is also added to Homan Square and its existence, and wondering, how did this ever happen in our city?
Azam, I want to get your reaction, because you live in Chicago. You are not an American citizen. We should mention that. You are from Canada.
Right.
But you're a guest on this program, but you reside in Chicago, so you can't vote.
Right.
But again, from a perspective of just this, we're getting back to what's happening in America. I mean, we have African Americans that are outraged. We have Caucasians that are outraged. We have Mexicans that are outraged because Donald Trump thinks that they're going to be, rounded up and put on a bus and shipped back. We have Muslims now where they're concerned that they're going to be rooted out and sent back or refused coverage, not sent back, refused entry into the United States. We've got a whole bunch of people that are all really riled up.
Absolutely.
And we're looking at it both at the national level and we're looking at it at the local level.
Absolutely.
I want to get your reaction from a Muslim perspective when we come back. 1-800-723-8289 from coast to coast and border to border. I'm Bruce DuMont.
Excuse me, Chet. Here is a flash from the Associated Press, Dateline Dallas. 2 priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead of bullet wounds.
It was a moment that defined American history. But what really happened in Dallas that day? And does that tragedy lead back to Chicago? A new play, Assassination Theater, answers that question. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. For tickets, go to assassinationtheater.com.
The beauty of Amling's interior landscape is that we can come in, work with your budget, and create a fit that makes sense for your facility at that time. Our goal is to create foliage designs that not only look incredible the day we put them in, but you can go back 2 years later and it is still maintained and has grown as a perfect fit for that customer's environment.
Call Amlings now at 888-880-TREE. Bruce Dumont back in Chicago. Doug, you were making a point about, we were talking about the Chicago police, and you were making a point.
Well, yeah, no, call it snarky, but we're talking about people are calling for Rahm Emanuel to resign, and
because of the police shootings,
and criticizing the entire police force. But really, should we be doing that? Should we be tarring an entire workforce of that includes the vast majority of great cops? Should we be calling all these other people in, like Rahm Emanuel and Alvarez and the prosecutors and all the cops and the management, just because of the actions of a few, just a tiny handful of murdery policemen?
Azam, your response.
That's amazing that you said that. I really appreciate it, because this is exactly what we're trying to say. And how are you going to identify a whole people with the actions of just a few? This is our cry over and over again.
So we should leave Rahm Emanuel alone too, then, because he's not responsible for the acts of those couple of policemen that are shooting people.
Rahm Emanuel was elected into office. Rahm Emanuel swore to exercise his power and authority with justice.
What about the rank and file police that are being criticized for their culture of silence or whatever? I mean, isn't it? Aren't you saying, you're saying it's a cultural problem? And I don't disagree with you.
I'm not saying it's.
But Doug, I think my point, or at least what I'm saying in this debate between the two of you here, is that some would argue that there's a code of silence in the Muslim community.
Exactly.
Because they're afraid to speak out against their bad apples, and I think that the term of one bad apple, I'm getting tired of that. It's more of bushels, several bushels of bad apples. But your point is that that's exactly. You're on the other end of
the grinder rests.
Right, exactly. And I'm not. I nowhere was I wanting to debate. I was just agreeing with you. I was just saying exactly what the point that you're saying. But you asked me a question earlier about living in Chicago and all the stuff that's going on.
Going on.
Look, I'm an imam. You brought me on here as an imam of the Islamic faith, and in Islam, everything is supposed to be based on absolute justice. That is the key to everything. That is the key to authority and key to power. Absolute justice in Islam means that even if you have to testify against your wife or your mother or your brother or your loved ones, you do it. And we will be held accountable to a higher power for the actions that you commit. Now, when we see that, I implore everyone to understand that in Islam, there is no civil disobedience allowed. You are supposed to obey the authority that are in power. So protests in Islam, according to the Holy Quran, not allowed. Because what does that do? It causes civil unrest. You see that happening in the Muslim world, where they're destroying their own infrastructure, going out and throwing Molotov cocktails, burning their own homes and stuff. Whenever there's a Quran Day going on here, they're destroying their own countries.
But I think that the point that should be brought up is also Martin Luther King said that riots are the language of the unheard. There are people in society who, but for those acts of civil disobedience, would not be voting, would not have integrated shopping centers and schools and all of the things that are part of, in the United States, American history. The other thing is that with the police department, there are some systemic and structural issues that have allowed for example, officers who have 70 complaints, who their records are not looked into when they're getting promoted. We have the current interim CPD superintendent who approved the reports that were found to have been fabricated by several police officers. So it's not to say that these individuals are horrible people across the board. I think most people that I've spoken with recognize that police officers have a very difficult job, but you have to address the systemic issues.
Do you have a practical thing that you think needs to be done in police departments?
Definitely. I think that they need to take into account the number of complaints that police officers have. So you should not have 70 or so complaints and be getting promoted. I think that...
wait. Isn't this... Let's cut to the chase here. Isn't this a problem of the unions? The police union.
Well,
the police union protects bad cops like the teachers union protects bad teachers,
and
like many unions protect bad workers.
And the city signs a contract with a fraternal order of police covering the policemen that includes provisions to cover up any abuse or brutality by the police. For example, police who are involved in a police shooting are given 24 hours before they have to give a statement as to the occurrence of the events. And by that time, they've all coordinated their statements. They've all coordinated with their union rep what their statement is, instead of each being brought in singly and asked and being determined exactly what happened.
So this is yet another problem frankly, for the Democratic Party, because to solve the problem that we're talking about in Chicago, whether it's the teachers that are about to go on strike, or it's the police department or the fraternal order police that is there to stand up quickly and defend the actions of any police officer, no matter how egregious they may be, because it's part of the contract. The point is, it reinforces what a lot of Republicans have been saying, is that at the heart of the Democratic Party, you have a structure, you have a union structure that is there to make things worse for people they're supposed to be serving. They're there to perpetuate a public education system that isn't educating, and certainly a police department, at least in perception of many people, that really has this code of silence and this undergirding of improper conduct.
It's something
that goes on and on.
It's
Nobody
something-
should have 80 complaints against them.
Exactly.
Nobody.
And I think the Democratic Party will have to grapple with that. I mean, it's the same in education.
Good luck.
And in the Fraternal Order of Police. But again, there are, for example, with open records, the amount of time that records are kept according to the police contract is, to me, directly contradicting Illinois open records laws. And so these are the things that in a contract should be negotiated with the public in mind, not just protecting
Will
the union
this,
members.
I'm asked this earlier in the show, I'm going to ask it again. What we're talking about right now, the distrust that exists between police departments and many, specifically in Chicago, but it exists in other cities as well. Maybe not as bad as it does in Chicago right now, because the spotlight and the heat lamp are on Chicago at the moment. With the black community, the disaffection with the black community. Is this a political scab that Donald Trump can start peeling off and speaking out and saying things that a Republican normally wouldn't be saying, and pick up black votes?
I think he could, because what we're seeing here is a city that has been democratically run by Democrats for decades, and still we find ourselves where we are. There was a study that was released, that was completed last year, the SAFER study, that was commissioned by city government, where they promised reforms, and yet again they sat on them. There was now, recent news came out that former Superintendent McCarthy had proposed some pretty significant reforms that would have addressed some of the union issues with the Fraternal Order of Police, but again, because of Corporation Council and the mayor, those reforms did not get done. So we're seeing that the Democratic Party, in name only, has not really done for communities what we think it should have done. And for that reason, it gives an opportunity for someone like Donald Trump to gain a foothold.
I want to get Donald Trump. This is Doug Obenthal. You're a Donald Trump supporter.
I welcome the entire panel to come home to Donald Trump. But more importantly, no, that was very, very well said. And I just wanted to quickly say, I can't add really much to that, but I thought Rahm Emanuel's best line from his big speech at City Council was that we cannot ask the folks in these neighborhoods, we can't ask them to end their culture of silence and to stand up to these gangs if the Chicago police will not. And I thought that was really the most insightful thing he said.
Do you agree with that, Michael?
Well, I agree with that. I will tell you, I don't think we're all going to come home and suddenly become Donald Trump supporters. And I'll speak for myself.
Slow
and
process.
certainly say that I'm not going to be. I think the issue that you're discussing right now, Bruce, the African-American community, I'd be surprised if Donald Trump's able to make inroads of any substantial nature into the African-American community. I think the issue is what the turnout will be next November in the African-American community for the Democratic ticket. I think who Donald Trump is playing to right now is, among others, a lot of independents, not only Republicans, but a lot of independents.
35% of his support is independents.
And a lot of independents.
Very high number.
And when people get nervous about security, whether it's national security, personal security, they get very fearful. And fear is what Donald Trump is playing to.
Do you believe, at this particular point, based on at least the reports that we know the Republican establishment is scared out of their mind. I would argue that if they're worried about what's going to happen, if they continue to gang up on Donald Trump, they are begging him, they are forcing him to basically forgo his pledge and run as an independent. And if he runs as an independent, would you support him if he ran as an independent?
I think it's a moot question. I know the press loves to have these discussions. It's not going to happen. Why would he? I mean,
if he goes into that convention with the necessary delegates. There's no way they can legally pull it away from him.
No.
But you certainly know there are ways that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party can gang up on him. And if he goes to Cleveland and doesn't walk out of that with a nomination, could he leave the party? Ben Carson has already threatened that he could leave the party if he feels that the Republican National Committee has been unfair to him.
That would only happen. That scenario would only happen if the Reince Priebus and the RNC was stupid enough to play some really, really dishonest game and steal this thing. I mean, National Convention, this thing is going to be under a spotlight. They're going to have to treat him fairly. As long as the thing is on the up and up. Trump has said that he's willing to, if he loses, he loses. I mean, he's willing to accept losing fair and square. But I just don't think.
And you think he's going to lose in Iowa, right? I mean,
Iowa
is no fit for Donald Trump. I don't know why he's pretending that he's going to still. Donald Trump is not going to win Iowa.
Let me say something on that. I think it's still possible. But let me just say, there's a part of me that actually hopes Donald Trump loses Iowa, because recent history has shown the folks of New Hampshire almost pride themselves of not following the lead. They're live free or die, and they really sort of pride themselves with going with somebody else than the farmers in Iowa picked in their view. That's a very, very, very small pool of voters.
Is there a role for
Iowa.
Chris Christie? Is there an opportunity, Michael, for Chris Christie to get back in if he does well in New Hampshire? Could he become the alternative, not Rubio, because maybe Rubio is not going as fast as a lot of people think. Rubio's not picking up as much money as I thought he would by now.
Well, one poll out of New
15
Hampshire
seconds.
had Christie in second place. So whether that poll is legitimate or not, we'll see whether other polls.
The battle of the big mouths from the Northeast. Back, Bruce DuMont back shortly from Chicago.
This is Larry King at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. Tonight we've got a special guest for you to meet. What do you like to do as a kid?
I like to play baseball. I like to watch television.
What was your favorite sports team?
Sports team growing up was the St. Louis Cardinals.
What was your favorite vacation?
I think the vacation we went to New York City to the World's Fair. It was to see Yankee Stadium.
Who was your childhood hero?
Childhood hero, probably Hopalong Cassidy.
What was your biggest fear growing up?
The biggest fear probably was that I would irritate my father.
What's the silliest thing you've ever done?
Irritated my father.
Give the gift of Larry King. Order your gift certificate now at museum.tv. That's museum.tv.
day. It really was quite a show. But we're sure you know the folks at home are waiting. We'd like to stay until next day, but man, we gotta go.
DuMont back in Chicago. Thanks very much for joining us for our broadcast this evening. And again, in case you just tuned in or have not been watching or listening for the last couple of weeks, I have said on this program, and I'm going to say it again, in my view, there are only three people who can be elected President of the United States. All the way. They go all the way to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And they are Hillary Clinton, Marco Rubio, and yes, I believe that Donald Trump could go all the way. Now, I also believe that it is possible, because I think he's played the strategy has been played masterfully thus far, is that Ted Cruz could be the Republican nominee. I don't think Ted Cruz can be elected President of the United States. I think he lacks some of the things that Donald Trump has, most notably a lot of money, celebrityhood, and frankly, doesn't have the personality traits, is a little stiff, little maybe too evangelical, and I don't say that in a pejorative way. I'm just talking about the demeanor in which he sort of preaches at you, a little less so than Donald Trump. So I don't think that Ted Cruz can be elected. But at the moment, it's a battle, both nationally and in Iowa, between Cruz and Trump. I think the establishment, frankly, would be more frightened with Ted Cruz than with Donald Trump. I really do. Because here's a guy, Ted Cruz, a first-term senator, who went into Washington and decided to turn over the apple cart. And to the establishment, I think he is, again, a huge problem. Now, Donald Trump, in this interview today with Chris Wallace, also had some things to say about Ted Cruz. And he was asked whether or not he thought that Ted Cruz was qualified to be President of the United States. Here's the answer.
To be president.
Why not?
Because I don't think he has the right temperament. I don't think he's got the right judgment.
What's wrong with this temperament?
Well, you look at the way he's dealt with the Senate, where he goes in there like frankly, like a little bit of a maniac. You're never going to get things done that way. Look, I built a phenomenal business. I'm worth many, many billions of dollars. I have some of the greatest assets anywhere in the world. You can't walk into the Senate and scream and call people liars and not be able to cajole and get along with people. He'll never get anything done, and that's the problem with Ted.
All right, Michael Bauer, do you disagree with that assessment?
About Ted Cruz?
Yeah.
I absolutely think, and I find this hard to believe I'm saying this, that I think Mr. Trump is right about Senator Cruz, yeah. who I think is a walking disaster. But I also feel the need to say...
Like a maniac.
Yes.
Like a maniac.
But I find it interesting, Donald Trump talking about someone else's temperament. because what we haven't said so far, and I want to make sure that I get on the record saying this, is Donald Trump as a candidate scares me very much. He is a demagogue. His comments that he makes continually are demeaning, mean-spirited, ugly. He appeals to the worst in people, not the best in people. And that's a very dangerous trait.
Let's go to calls. Let's go to Marty, listening to us in Evanston, Illinois. Go ahead, Marty. You're on the air.
Hi, Bruce. I don't mean to change the subject here, but I've been listening for the last hour or so about this about Islam and it being the religion of peace, and I really have to take issue with that. It is true that the vast majority of American Muslims, according to Pew Research, 81% of American Muslims believe that suicide bombings are never justified. But you know what? 8% think that they're justified. That's 650,000 American Muslims who think, according to Pew Research, that suicide bombings are justified. And you know what? They're not radical. They are what I would call Orthodox Muslims. They are people who actually believe in what the Quran says about killing people if they don't become Muslims.
Let's Azam, your response.
My response to that would be that is alarming, and we have to work as Americans to combat that mentality. We open our mosques to everyone to come and listen what type of sermons we deliver and how we educate our members. There may be some who harbor those thoughts and those feelings, but we explicitly say that this is against the teaching of Islam. And if you want us to be out on the forefront to help combat this type of ideology, we stand with you to do that. That is our mission.
But would you? But let me just ask. Let me just ask a follow up, Marty. Then we'll back to you. A point would be that the Republicans like to use radical Islam. They got a big thing about the president and Hillary Clinton can't using the term radical Islam. You're a Muslim. What words do you use to describe the people that Marty is fearful of? This 8%. Right. Are they? He called them Orthodox. Is that within the religion? Is that a more appropriate way to describe them?
You would call a Muslim one who follows the Quran. The Quran, nowhere in it does it justify suicide, period. If you can find a verse or an inkling towards that, it's absolutely wrong. Killing oneself is not justified anywhere in our Holy Scripture.
Well, the Surah of the Sword, Surah 9, verse 5 says, "And when the sacred months have passed, then kill the polytheists wherever you find them and capture them and besiege them and sit and wait for them at every place of ambush."
Can you read?
We're not going to turn this into a theological discussion, but I do want to make this point here.
We won't turn it into a theological discussion. What I request is you read the preceding verses before it and the verses that follow after it. Read it in that context and read the historical analysis of what was going on during the time of war and why those verses were revealed. Because for the first 13 years of the Prophet's life, when his children, his family members, and his followers were being maimed, killed, and subjected to brutal torture, his followers came up to him and requested that, let us defend ourselves, and he told them to remain patient because you have not yet been commanded to defend yourself. After these verses came up, what I will tell you is we can have a discussion about it, maybe not on this program, maybe Bruce, you can invite me later on, we can have a whole program, and I will answer you all these other questions that are there in the Muslim mind.
But you do agree with Marty that 680,000 people is
absolutely
is scary.
Absolutely.
Marty, thanks very much. We're going to move to Carlos listening to us in Houston, Texas on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Go ahead, Carlos.
Thank you, Bruce. I want to comment. If Trump or Cruz won, I'd be a happy camper. I don't have a problem with either one of them.
How about as a team?
I'm sorry?
How about as a team? Although Donald Trump just took Ted Cruz out of running to be his running mate because he said that Ted Cruz is not qualified to be president of the United States. Your dream ticket of Trump and Cruz ain't going anywhere.
Well, it may happen still, but I'll tell you what. I would rather see Ted Cruz as a Supreme Court justice. I would hope that's where he ends up as, instead of the VP or as president. However, if Trump and Cruz did become the ticket, I would vote for that ticket. I would vote for a Cruz-Trump ticket. There is no way in hell I will vote for Marco Rubio.
How about Chris Christie?
Never.
There's no other Republican. And if Hillary Clinton is running, if Hillary Clinton is running, you are absolutely 100%. You are sure that Ted Cruz or Donald Trump would beat her.
Yes, and if I'm wrong, hey, we get what we deserve. This country gets the government it deserves. But if
by the way, there's a lot of people in Chicago that are saying the same thing about the mayor's race. Amira?
Yes. So the Supreme Court nominations are, to me, that is one of the most important things about this upcoming election. It is who gets put on the court. I would be frightened, quite frankly, if
you would.
Ted Cruz or a Donald or
absolutely.
I mean, you'd rather see him as vice president.
No, I wouldn't want to see them on
over the
Supreme
Court.
But
by the way, just the thought, the thought. By the way, the principal job of the vice president is to preside over the Senate. Can you imagine if Ted Cruz were to emerge as somebody's vice president? Here is the guy who is absolutely the most hated man in the U.S. Senate. He's called the majority leader a liar publicly. Can you imagine what life would be like in the U.S. Senate? Do you think, as Donald Trump suggested, do you think much would be getting done if Ted Cruz became president because he's such an anathema to the people who run Congress? Michael, I mean, Trump was dead on with his concern about.
I think if we're talking at this point in time, in the winter of 2015, about government dysfunctionality and how frustrated so many of us are with the dysfunctionality, among other things, of the federal government. Can you imagine if Ted Cruz was in a position of real power in Washington, D.C., how dysfunctional the government would become?
It's frightening.
People that I have a lot of respect for are supporting Ted Cruz. I think he's a serious choice. Personally, I agree with you, Bruce. I think he would have a very hard time in a general election. He actually may have the highest IQ in the entire field. I mean, he's
that's a liability. That's a liability.
Impressive legal credentials, clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court. But I do think that unlike Donald Trump, who's actually built tangible things, Ted Cruz he is known for obstruction.
Okay. Thanks very much. By the way, this evening, I've not mentioned who our guests are. They are Azam Akrab. He is an imam, Muslim faith. Michael Bauer joins us. Amira Enya is here. She is a political leader in the city of Chicago. And also Doug Eibendal. He is a supporter of Donald Trump. I'm Bruce DuMont. We will continue from Chicago. Don't go away.
That not only look incredible the day we put them in, but you can go back 2 years later and it is still maintained and has grown as a perfect fit for that customer's environment.
Call Amblings now at 888-880-TREE.
Excuse me, Chet. Here is a flash from the Associated Press, Dateline Dallas. 2 priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead of bullet wounds.
It was a moment that defined American history. But what really happened in Dallas that day? And does that tragedy lead back to Chicago? A new play, Assassination Theater, answers that question. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. For tickets, go to assassinationtheater.com. Bruce DuMont back. You were talking about an imam in Beaumont, Texas.
Yes.
This is
yes,
Doug Eibendahl,
Yes.
Trump supporter.
A week ago this imam came out and said that he agreed with Donald Trump's temporary, let's remember this, temporary ban on immigration. And because he had come out, he immediately got phone calls from his board, and he has been removed as the imam for speaking out, for saying what he thought and agreeing
Your
with
reaction to
Donald
that is on?
That's unfortunate. I mean, as an imam, as a leader, if he felt that he agreed with Donald Trump, that was his right, his decision to make, and he shouldn't have been removed from the
What
position.
type of training does one get to be an imam?
Well, to put it in simple words, Islam is not a unified. It's supposed to be unified, but even within Islam, there are many communities out there. You've got many denominations, many different sects. An imam basically is an Arabic word that means leader, a leader of a congregation or a leader of a community.
Is it like a pastor?
Exactly. In the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, the community which I belong, there's a 7-year intensive training program where you deal with religious doctrine, you deal with the traditions of other religions and other faiths as well. And it's a very grueling and intense, and it gives you an understanding and a scope of how you would be dealing with different people all across with different faiths and how Islam approaches that. So that is from my experience. There might be somebody who might be boosted up to become an imam as long as he has support from his congregation and then say, this is our leader.
Michael Bauer, I want to ask you a question. One of the things that you do, I mentioned you're very active in the gay and lesbian community. You're also with the Holocaust Commission in the state of
Illinois Holocaust and Genocide Commission.
Genocide Commission.
I'm co-chair, yes.
There have been frequent references that what Donald Trump is saying by rallying up a variety of people in America is reminiscent of what Adolf Hitler was able to do in the late 30s. Do you see that similarity? Are you concerned about that repeating itself?
Absolutely.
Tell me why.
I look at the first one who mentioned this to me was my 99-year-old mother, who is a survivor of Nazi concentration camps, sole survivor of her family, of her parents and 8 siblings. And my mother said this months ago, that she said Donald Trump reminds her of Adolf Hitler when he was first starting. And it's because of the way he speaks. He speaks mean-spirited. He speaks to try to rile people up in a mean way, in an angry way. He appeals to people's fears, and he does it intentionally. I have no doubt Donald Trump is a very savvy guy. He knows exactly what he's doing, and that's why he scares me.
I have to respectfully totally disagree with that.
I would expect you would.
Mark is a smart guy. I respect him, and I respect his opinion, but I think that is completely over the top, and I think that is really ridiculous. Is Billy Graham's son, Franklin Graham, I mean, is he like Hitler? Because he's been saying the same thing for years, same thing that Donald Trump's been saying. How about the state of Israel? I mean,
but he's not like his father. Franklin Graham is not like his father.
Well, but he's saying that. Right. Well, he leads that delegation now, and even the imam from Beaumont,
you don't see any similarities. In other words, I think it's important for people because there may be young people. I mean, Adolf Hitler was elected. Right. He was elected by the people of Germany because of a charismatic speaker. And Donald Trump is a charismatic speaker. Again, I'm not trying to make this connection. I'm just saying I don't want to totally dismiss it.
Mark is too smart. Mike is too smart for this. He knows when you play the Hitler card, you've already lost the argument. That is the most desperate thing ever. When I hear someone playing the Hitler card about Donald Trump, what I really hear is, oh my gosh, the Republicans actually might nominate someone this time who actually might win in November.
But I think that does a disservice to people who have experienced many atrocities
Jeez,
under
exactly.
Hitler-like characters, no matter where they are in the world. I think this is a real concern. The tone for the country is set in leadership. It starts at the top. And so when your leadership is using language that is very polarizing,
second.
language that could demonize entire groups of people, you have to take that into account, because history has shown
But wait a
that
second.
when we have not been vigilant, we've had internment of Japanese.
But
we've
also,
had
but
the
also,
whole-
I want to just follow up it. Would you also acknowledge, Amara, based on what how a leader should talk, that a leader should talk and his followers should understand what he's saying, and in a democracy agree in a majority way with what he's saying? And part of the frustration we have in this country now is that this president is saying things that a lot of people in America don't like, or he's saying it in this soft, mumbly, professorial voice. I mean, this guy, you know, as someone who made his claim to fame as being a great orator because he read a speech at a Boston convention, and is remarkable. He's the master of the teleprompter.
Well, the problem is,
But in a press conference, this guy is Mr. Hem and Haw. He's almost as much of a hem and haw as George W. Bush.
I think that's
And,
more
and I mean,
reflection
off the top.
That's more a reflection of his position as president and a Congress that he could not work with, and it's more of a reflection of the complicated things that we're dealing with than his having a tone of being demonizing groups. I think there's a difference between his inability to be forceful on the stance because he doesn't know if he wants to take that forceful stance, and having a tone that actually demonizes groups or is reminiscent of things that have oppressed
10
people in
seconds. We've got 10
history.
seconds.
I mean, when somebody throws it out there and says we got to ID and identify, and Muslims have to have an ID card walking around or have to have them identified.
Which is
that's
not what he
rhetoric.
said. That is not what he said. Never said it. Never said it.
Okay.
On that note, we have not solved any problems this evening. They will all be still alive and well next week, unfortunately. But I want to thank Azam Akram. Thank you very much for being with us. Michael
Appreciate
Bauer, thank you very much. Amira Enya, Doug Ibendal, thank you very much for being with us. This program is a Genevieve production produced in association with WLS Radio. Our thanks, not WLS Radio, WCGO. Forget WLS Radio. They had nothing to do with this program. Goodbye. I'm Bruce DuMont. See you next week.